Hello and welcome to a new episode of Talking Law from Women in the Law UK. I'm Sally Penni MBE. I'm a barrister at Camworthy's Chambers in Manchester, the Joint Vice Chair of the Association of Women Barristers and the founder of Women in the Law UK. You can find out more about the work I do at womeninthelawuk.com, including webinars on subjects covering how to become a general counsel to how to communicate effectively and how to have more confidence. There are so many different subjects to explore and are all available to watch again on our YouTube channel and as podcasts on Apple Podcasts. There's also a series of Talking Law books which are available on Amazon. Talking Law 3 celebrates diversity in the law, and the cover is inspired by the viral lawyer I'm Not a Cat. You can find out more about the book and other books by me on employment rights, data protection, and criminal law by visiting Amazon. Today I'm talking law with the fascinating lawyer Chris Kehoe. Chris knew he wanted to work in law from a young age and has spent the last 12 years working as an in-house lawyer for a police force. But as he explained to me, he has some rather surprising sidelines as well.
But I'm also a stand-up comedian and currently artist, because I'm doing quite a bit of painting on my spare time as well, and I've found a little avenue to sell those. So I think in theatre I'd be called a triple threat is the term.
I love that, triple threat. Yes, maybe I'll adopt that name. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, can we start from sort of the beginning of your legal career? Because you're a non-practicing barrister. So how and why did you become a lawyer, really?
Well, probably I think about 14 or 15, the time of life when you start to actually consider what you might be able to do as a career, rather than, once you realise that you're not going to be a professional footballer or an astronaut or something like that. I looked at the sorts of jobs that might be available to me, and a career in law seemed like something that was viable and interesting. So it started there. I then took the usual route through university. Did a master's in European law after I did an LLB, which obviously is now completely meaningless now that we've left the EU. I may as well have a master's degree in phrenology or something like that. But there we are. So not always at the zeitgeist, clearly. But and then I went to bar school to do the BVC after that, and then did the thing of effectively drifting around a little bit, to be honest with you, through different paralegal type roles and so on, until I got an opportunity to work in local government. So I worked as a local government litigation lawyer for a period of time, because in the public sector, working in-house, you do have quite a bit of scope to get a right of audience to go to the lower courts under the you can be granted that right by your employed, your employer.
Yes.
And it's a good way to gain some experience and build a CV. Which is what I always thought I was doing, and then almost 15 years later, I'm still doing it. So my CV is quite big now. But there we are.
Interesting. Now, Chris, you were educated by the state. You went to a state comp. Did you know that police forces had lawyers who worked in them?
No, I mean, not at all. No. So I mean, I didn't really know it until I was offered a position there, because I was working at the time I came to work for the police. I was working for a local authority in a locum position. So I was on effectively the contractor merry-go-round with different employment agencies and so on, which I found was quite a good way to get some good experience. Without going through a formal, it's easier to get a job via an agency than it is to have to go through a recruitment centre, for example. So I was doing that, and as one of the jobs that came up was working for one of the local forces. And up until that point, I had no idea that there was actually an in-house legal team. I didn't know what they would do or anything like that. So it was when I was offered the position, it was a real learning experience as to what sort of work an in-house legal team and a police force does. And as I've come to realise, it's a huge variety of different work that they do, because, encompassing, there's internal employment issues for the civilian staff, there's police misconduct. So there's a whole area of regulatory work in there that's very unique and specific to the police.
Yes.
You've also then got operational policing work. So from the point of view of, you can be effectively part of an operational policing team and give advice from a legal perspective as to what that will be taken as almost as at the tactical level, and then as well as the enforcement type work, which is applying for things like sexual harm prevention orders and various other sort of risk orders, in essence, to help manage offenders in the community.
Yes.
Plus, then you've got the other side of that. You've got the entire world of civil claims against the police, of which there are a lot, as you can imagine. So it covers a lot of work. But until getting the job, though, I had no idea that there were in-house legal teams. I just assumed that, in essence, there was the police and there was a CPS, and that was it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's amazing because, even the RAF has legal teams, and there's a variety of different areas that people can work as lawyers. So it's really interesting. So tell me, because you still go to court, what would an average day ensue? And it's wonderful to see you're still using your advocacy skills in court.
Yeah. But fortunately, I'm one of the lucky ones that I do get to go to court quite a lot. In the magistrates court are still operational, in essence. Well, as much as they are operational, they're still going, and you physically have to be in court for a lot of the hearings. Although they're rolling that back a little bit now with the CVP hearings.
Yes.
So an average day for me, though, really would involve getting up relatively early. That's mainly because I've got young children and nothing to do with my dedication to the role, I don't think. And then dealing with effectively ad hoc advices that come in about all sorts of different things. So, for example, today, just to give you an example, in a way that doesn't put me in breach of the Official Secrets Act.
Of course. We wouldn't want that.
No, exactly. I've advised on sort of the use of body-worn footage within police stations in different situations, and it's really niche advice like that you end up advising on, and about all sorts of different issues that come up, because obviously the police's activity covers a wide variety of different behaviours and different situations. So I'll advise on things like that, and then find myself trotting off to a court to deal with quite a lot of things like Proceeds of Crime Act forfeiture applications. I deal with quite a lot of those. And it may well be that I have a day of trialing on that. Then the following day, I might be in the family court dealing with disclosure issues. So disclosure from the criminal jurisdiction into the family jurisdiction and vice versa. There's quite a lot of work in that as well. And then after that, I may well be dealing with some sex offender who's decided he wants to vary the terms of his prevention order or risk order, and I'll go and make representation on behalf of the chief constable in relation to that. So that's fairly standard fare for me, to be honest with you. And so it's quite a wide variety. It's quite a varied role, and I'm quite fortunate in that regard, in that I'm not pigeonholed into just dealing with one area of law, because it never appealed to me to have a job where it was the same thing every day, which is why I think I chose to go to the bar, albeit I've started working in this sort of quasi in-house solicitor role. It's my actual role within that, or within the organisation, is that it is more akin to working at the bar than effectively working like a claims handler in a claim farm, in essence, which it wouldn't be something I would like to do.
No, but you're quite an example of, what the law can provide in the different areas of law that people can work in, which can be, short-sighted sometimes, particularly for young people. They see the obvious areas, but it's quite interesting. But not only that, you are also an example of being more than your job. And so I want to come to well-being, because you're a comedian, lawyer, and artist. And so I want to talk a little bit about the comedy side of what you do outside of the day job, because you're a well-known comedian. You've been described as uniquely original, astounding. These are all reviews of your shows. A satirist, but my favorite is this one: an important and intelligent voice, and that was from Manchester Wire. And so how did you get into comedy, especially as a lawyer who was dealing with really serious stuff in the daytime? How did you get into writing comedy and performing comedy? Because you've played it like the Comedy Club, you're quite well known.
Yeah, well, I mean, I started as a lot of people do. I think a lot of people that get into stand-up comedy, it's something that you've often wanted to do for a long time. So I started off in that same way. I was a comedy fan, And I loved stand-up comedy as an art form, and as entertainment. And for a long time, I'd wanted to do it. And yet it always seemed like something that somebody else did, if that makes sense. It didn't
Yes.
seem like it was something that you would do, because how do you start doing it? And then I went to watch a friend of mine do what's called a gong show at the Comedy Store in Manchester. Now, the gong show is something where it's an open mic event, so anyone can put their name down and get on stage. And in essence, you have 5 minutes you need to try and get through 5 minutes of being a stand-up comedian at the Comedy Store. And yet there's a twist to it, in that there are 3 cards in the room. So 3 members of the audience are given a card. And if that member of the audience doesn't like you, or one of your punchlines doesn't quite work or whatever, they'll put their card up. And then once all 3 cards go up, a gong goes and you have to leave the stage. And often people get to like 2 minutes or something. And it's really it's a bit of a bear pit of a gig.
Brutal.
It is brutal. It's gladiatorial. It's not for the faint-hearted. So I went to watch a friend of mine do that back in 2013, I think it was. And frankly, he was awful. He was absolutely terrible. Like, he had like the worst gig that I've ever seen anybody ever have before or since then. And he got gonged off after about a minute. None of his material worked, and so on. And talking to him in the bar afterwards, and he was all right. Like he'd had the worst sort of live stand-up comedy experience you could have, and he was still fine. There was nothing actually wrong with him afterwards. So I thought, well, what am I frightened of then? So I put my name down to do that gong show in a couple of months' time. I had a pretty good gig, fortunately, for my first time, that made me think, oh, actually, I think I might be able to do this. And from there, I just built up. So I started going to more open mic nights. I got seen by 1 or 2. So at each open mic night you do, certainly within the main clubs, they'll have a professional comedian as the MC to make sure at least somebody in the room knows what they're doing and to keep the night on track. And so it's a way in. You get to meet actual circuit comics, and people that you've seen on the TV. It's quite a small world, the stand-up comedy world. And so 1 or 2 of them saw me, liked me, gave my name to other people. Word of mouth is a big thing, as it is in most areas of life, to be fair. And I found myself within sort of 2 or 3 years getting paid to do it. And then I was, in essence, a circuit comic alongside being a lawyer by day, and basically very tired is what I've been ever since.
And you had 2 children in the meantime.
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously tired. But actually, you did go into comedy with a bit of an advantage, because you're from Bolton, aren't you, in the north of England, which has produced an awful lot of talent, including Maxine Peake, the actress, Peter Kay, the comedian, Victoria Wood. But I'm not sure, was Victoria Wood from Bolton? Or maybe I'm just mixing up. Where was she from?
She's from Ramsbottom, Victoria.
Ramsbottom,
so
that's right.
That's getting on towards Bury way.
Okay,
so not too far away.
Not too far. It's still nearby. It's like 30 minutes within. So, for a small area, it has produced some comedy geniuses, and now including yourself. Was that a sort of a power boost, do you think?
Yeah, well, it's like Phoenix Nights, which was obviously Peter Kay's big TV show. That was filmed at St Gregory's Catholic Club, which is basically at the back of my mum and dad's house. So when they were filming that, I was still living there at the time, in between being at university. And that sort of that does, it's strange, but just proximity to something like that, and you realise that this was something that gained national recognition, and it was being created in the place that my dad used to go drinking on a Saturday afternoon. It does almost give you a license to realise it is something that you can do, and that is the thing about stand-up comedy, is that it is open to everybody. It's completely sort of free as an art form, and anyone can do it. You don't need lots of equipment. You don't need to have lots of lessons or anything like that. You can just get up and give it a go and learn on the job. And that, I think, is something that is hugely advantageous to it as an art form, because it's just spoken word. It's just telling stories around a campfire, which human beings have done for centuries. So
yes,
it's just an extension of that.
You make it sound easy, but of course it's not, because I've tried it for charity,
Yeah.
and I was advocating for keeping jurors as the best form for justice, and it's very hard. I mean, it's extreme. You make it all sound so easy. That's because you're a professional. I've seen also Sally Harrison and some other barristers perform for charity, and they also said it was nerve wracking, and they would never do it again. Was sticking to the day job. But Chris,
Yeah.
I want to ask you. You also have a podcast called Mondeo Law.
Yeah.
Outside of the day job, how did that come about? Because you blog, you tweet, you're quite good on Facebook. How did certainly the podcast and the blogging come about? Are you quite comfortable with those things?
Yeah, I mean, they're an extension of the stand-up, and the Mondeo Law was a way to marry together my day job and the comedy. Because at first I kept the day job and my stand-up very separate, for fairly obvious reasons in terms of confidentiality and so on. And I also wanted to be judged as stand-up in my own right rather than someone with an interesting backstory, you know.
Yes, yeah.
And yeah, but then one of my friends, Alex Boardman, who is a stand-up comedian, and he's done that since he left university. He studied law at university, but never worked within the legal profession. And
Ah,
he said what would be interesting if me and you just recorded some things together of us talking about the law, and I'll see what I can remember from university, and you can test me. And it grew from that really, and it's become so we started off in the first series, we effectively went through the criminal law syllabus as it would be taught at university to introduce some basic concepts,
mm,
and the idea is to demystify the law, and to show that someone with my accent can work in it, and we can have a laugh around it, and it's not all crusty and dusty, you know.
yes,
It's a living thing, and that it's open to, or it should be open to everyone. And I think I think we have been successful in what our mission statement was. If we had, you know, it's a bit a lofty term, a mission statement, but and then we've had a couple of messages from people saying that they have gone on to study law as a result of listening to the podcast and realizing that, oh, maybe I can do it. If this, I mean, I don't know whether that's a sort of backhanded compliment, like if this idiot can do it, then so can I. But it's
it's all
it's
good. It's all
it's
good,
all
I
good,
think.
yeah, exactly. It's a nice feeling to think that, oh, somebody has actually
Yeah,
benefited from something that we've done. So,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's descended of late into effectively as trying to be topical about the law. So just to, you know, just to try and boost listeners, really. So we've done a lot about the COVID regulations in the last few months. We've done a lot about vaccines and various other things, the right to protest, freedom of speech, all that. And I like to sort of set myself a challenge of trying to teach myself about an area of law that I don't necessarily know about, in the week that, you know, that we do a podcast, so I can learn as well. So yeah, it's good fun, and it's a way to, like I say, to marry together the two sort of main facets of my working life.
I mean, I have really enjoyed them. I used to listen anyway, but I listened to them whilst prepping for this, and I definitely recommend it. Now, a
Oh,
lot of
thanks.
that stuff are things you're doing in your spare time. So I want to come to sort of, I mentioned well-being before, but what do you do to relax? Or are you doing the comedy stand-up, the podcast, the writing, and the painting? As means of relaxing, because you know the day job is full on, and burnout rate actually in law is high. So what do
Yeah.
you do to relax?
Well, some of it, some of the stand up, less so the stand up since it became a job, because it you know, there is like a mental switch when something becomes a job from being a hobby. That means that, you know, there's more pressure on it. You know, when you're being paid to do something and people are paying to watch you, then there is a pressure that comes with that. So that while being a good bit of almost like therapy, because you can talk about things in a way that you can't talk about them at work, or necessarily with your family. So it is a way of, it's not necessarily relaxing, but it is beneficial, I think. But certainly painting I find relaxing in that it's probably the one thing that I do that while I'm doing it, I'm completely immersed in it and I'm not thinking about anything else. And I can, you know, it is mindfulness in action, in essence.
Yes.
So I do that. But I also find that getting out in nature, I'm quite fortunate that living in Bolton, I can walk from my house and within an hour I'm up on the moors. And I find that to be the thing that I do now to actually keep me grounded, is to
Yeah.
walk through the woods up onto the moors, up to the top of Winter Hill, and effectively back again. And that's like there's a thing in Japanese culture called forest bathing, where you effectively go and envelop yourself in nature in a woodland setting,
Mm.
and get within the rhythm of it. So I enjoy bird watching, so I like to sit in the woods, and then let the wildlife reveal itself to me. And again, that's something else that I can do that, while I'm doing that, I'm not thinking about anything else.
Yes. When you said bathe, I thought you had to do this naked. I hope not.
No,
Uh,
no, no.
only, in case you get people on their 1 hour exercise, suddenly seeing you with your binoculars or whatever. But yeah, I'm glad that it's fully closed.
Yeah,
Chris,
yeah.
I want to ask you about diversity, and what you think about diversity in the law. Things are improving, but really, in terms of not just gender, but ethnicity, and social mobility. What do you think? And do you think we can do more to improve?
Well, I think things are improving, as you say. Although I think one of the main issues in this country, and it's not just in the law, I mean, and the law really, we're in a country that is governed by the rule of law, and the law should reflect society to a degree, if it's working properly. And and society moves at a pace, and the law is always trying to catch up with it. So the I think it will always appear to be less, successful at embracing things like diversity than possibly it is. But I think one of the problems really though is to do with social mobility. So we still have, as long as we have like a public school system in the country where if you've been to a certain school, then that looks very good on your CV and certain doors are open to you because of connections that you make socially and the people that you're able to network with. I think as long as we have that system, then it won't really reflect society properly, and therefore it won't be diverse. Because it's not just diversity in terms of gender or ethnicity, but like I say, in terms of social class and people from different backgrounds with different life experiences, being
Yeah.
able to gain access to the corridors of power, as it were.
Mm.
And I think more could be done to open up like that. But until, as a society, we move beyond this idea that social class is an indicator of competence, then I think we'll struggle, to be honest with you. And I think that, we will still have people from certain social backgrounds taking up 90% of the senior positions, within the law and within government. And in essence, the law does therefore reflect how we are, set up as a society.
Yes. Well, on that then, I mean, what would be your kind of three tips of advice and guidance then for people entering or aspiring to enter the law? Because I am concerned that COVID is not only bad for all the obvious reasons, but professionally, in terms of progression, we're going to go backwards somewhat. And younger
Yeah.
people, we know they are specifically a group who are struggling to find employment. They were subject to mass redundancies and so on. There was a whole generation. So I wondered if you had maybe some cheery tips and advice, for morale or otherwise. Three tips about if you're starting in the law, what to do and how to keep going.
I would say to be open-minded about what you want to do. I think sometimes, if you are absolutely dead set on a certain, goal, then by all means pursue that. But realize that quite often people that are successful in life, um, are successful because they've been flexible to react to situations and to follow different avenues and so on. And so I would always stress that an open mind is important, and also not to beat yourself up, if you feel the fear of failure is something that will actually make you fail, yourself, and so don't worry about. I would always just say just try things, work towards something, and try it. Be reactive and proactive at the same time. I know that sounds like it's very easy to say, but less easy to do. But I would advocate for that. and also, like anything else, is like just work hard at something. Like the I think that, most people, I'm a big believer in the talent method. I don't think there's such a thing as talents necessarily. I think there are certain attributes that you've got that you can work on to make yourself better at something. But most people are where they are because of work. And that if you work hard, you will be able to, if you disregard what I said before about glass ceilings and glass floors and so on with the class system, you will be able to have a successful career as long as you apply yourself. And as long as you've applied yourself, then you can be happy that you've done well. And there's nothing more that you could have done. The worst thing that you could have in life is to look back and think that I didn't really try at that, and I wish I had
Yes.
done.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
and do things while you're young as well. Like if you want to do stand-up comedy, even, or you want to be a lawyer. I mean, it's never too late. But I think that don't be conservative with a small c. Just try things, embrace any opportunities that come your way, because I turned 41 a month ago, and it doesn't seem like very long ago that I had that I was 18, and it all it all soon goes whizzing by, and you get to this stage of life where year after year, it just passes by in a blur. So yeah, just do it. Just do embrace everything, I would say.
I love that. Embrace everything. I'm going to try and stop saying no, which is great. Which is great, or maybe just the clerks. That is brilliant. That's really, really useful, Chris. Can I ask you a question that I always ask my guests? What's your favorite book and why? And the second follow-up question, really, who's your favorite fictional lawyer?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite book is often the book that I'm reading at the moment, and unless it's terrible, like I read a lot, and I love reading. I always have done. So at the minute I'm reading a book called The Adventures of China Iron, which is an Argentinian book translated into English. I can't speak Spanish, which is a retelling of Argentina's foundational epic poem about a gaucho called Martin Fierro. So that's quite cool. I think my favorite book of all time, though, and I always say this, is The Outsider by Albert Camus, which I read when I was studying French A level, and I read at a time when I was quite impressionable, and I loved the. He's classed as an existentialist, Camus, but he's really an absurdist. But his stance in The Outsider, and a lot of his thinking is that you are here, you didn't choose to be here. The meaning of life is just to live life, so just live life, and that is what I took from that. I know obviously it's quite a sad book, The Outsider, in that there's a murder and someone gets condemned, and so on. And the protagonist, Merceau, I mean, he may be the antagonist, I'm not sure. He's someone that doesn't really have a great deal of plans or seemingly much about him beyond he reacts just to situations, and he's quite passive throughout it. And I think he also gets punished for being honest as well, and that in his trial, they're not really bothered about the crime. They're more concerned with the fact he didn't cry at his mother's funeral, and things like that. And he's quite stoic throughout it, until right at the end when he has an argument with the priest in his cell. But I just love the way it's written. I love books that have a sense of place, and that within The Outsider, it's set in Algeria, which is where Camus was from, and you get a real sense of the location, and it's just immersive, I think. Plus, it's quite short as well, so you can read it in an afternoon and feel that you've done something intellectual. So.
Absolutely. I mean, I read it. I wouldn't say it was my favorite book, but it's good for our, Women in the Law book club, which we have. So we're always looking for books to read, although we do invite the author for a discussion after we discuss the book. But yeah, it's a good.
You'd struggle to get Camus there since he died.
Oh yeah, I know. That's why I'm not sure it'd be a good choice. But
so our good books. There's another. Do you know the writer Louis de Bernier? He obviously wrote Captain Corelli's Mandolin.
Yes.
He wrote a trilogy before that of books set in a fictional South American country, and they're all very magical realism. There's a lot of. You can tell that he was reading a lot of Gabriel Garcia Marquez when he wrote them.
Yes.
But they're wonderful. they're so immersive, those ones as well. And again, they have a real sense of place with them, and they're quite dark at points as well. And yeah, so that trilogy for your book club, they would be great books to discuss because there's a lot going on in them. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, good, good. They do have to have a legal element, but I'd love to read them anyway. And what about the fictional lawyer?
Yeah, my favorite fictional lawyer. I mean, it's a bit. It's. I'm going to choose the for a lawyer and comedian. I'm going to have to say Vinny Gambini, who is My Cousin Vinny, as played by Joe Pesci in the film My Cousin Vinny. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have seen it, and it is a favorite lawyer of, I think, Jamie Hamilton. That's one of his favorites, I think.
Is it right? He's great. I love his style of when he turns up dressed like an usher from a 50s cinema, and his style of cross-examination is superb as well. When he gets the chap to say, "I don't know, I'm a fast cook, I guess." He said, "Sorry, I was all the way over here. Did you just say you were a fast cook?" So great.
I love that. I love that. Well, Chris, just to finish, really, I wonder now. You're a mature man now, father. Been in a job for 15 years, I think, according to my research, or more. Have you got some advice to your 21-year-old self? If you were to look back, what advice would you give to your 21-year-old self? Is there anything that you would say to the young Chris?
I think I would advise him to go it's a good thing, but to take a year out and go traveling. In that there's lots of parts of the world that I haven't been to, and that as I get older, it's looking less likely I'll get to go to them. Never say never, but you have to be realistic about things. So I think I would advise him to do that, and I would also advise him to just not worry about things so much. I used to be quite nervous and worried about other people's what other people thought of me. You need to be mindful of what other people think of you, but I would just tell him that it's all right. Everything's okay, and you can go and you can just relax and enjoy things more and not have so much. I think I suffered from possibly a little bit of status anxiety. There's a book by Alain de Botton called Status Anxiety, which is like very much the Western state of mind, really, and being concerned about keeping up with the Joneses and so on. And that didn't come naturally to me. It's like I almost had that thrust upon me by being around people from different social classes at university. And it took me a while to sort of get back out of that and re-embrace the childhood me, who's the geek who's into sort of bird watching and drawing and painting. So I would advise him to get to that stage quicker, basically.
Wonderful. Now, just before we go, have you got a case that's memorable to you? Sometimes when I ask this question, people say, "Oh, the first case I ever did when I was on my feet," or and sometimes a case that's changed the client's life, or somebody that's just rang you and you've advised me over the phone and it's really had an impact. I think Simon McCrum said that, actually. And I just wondered, in the areas that you cover, particularly, with the police force, nothing that obviously would breach confidentiality, but I just wondered if you had a memorable case that always stayed with you.
Yeah, I had one, and it's memorable in so much that it was the first time that I had done that I conducted a case in which I felt like a proper lawyer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
In so much that I'd been in court quite a lot before then, but it had all been sort of relatively run of the mill, because it involved having to cross-examine an expert witness, and so it was in Asbel before they were superseded by the anti-social behaviour injunctions,
Yes.
and the other side instructed an expert to basically say that their clients couldn't follow. He had sufficient mental difficulty that he wouldn't be able to follow the terms of the order, and therefore you shouldn't make the order against him. Now we didn't have an expert in opposition to that because we hadn't instructed one, so I had to basically try and undermine the expert's expertise and so on, and I managed to, after about just like 20 minutes or so of cross-examination, get her to say the line, "I don't know, I'm not an expert in this," which was quite a lovely experience for me. So we got the order through, and yeah, I did a little metaphorical cheer when she said that. So that was nice.
Perry Mason, I'll finish where I started.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
exactly.
And Chris, I mean, I can see you've got quite long hair. It's tied up at the moment. You're a man. I'm all about people bringing their authentic selves to work. And I read recently a comment by somebody who'd said, if young people want work experience, they should wear a suit and cut their hair or something. And it was all blowing up on Twitter. Is that a deliberate look? And I know, Leslie Thomas QC, he's got long dreadlocks, and that's his whole self. He's quite happy to lock his hair. But is that a deliberate look? And, is there a perception about what a lawyer should look like? Or have you just not cut your hair?
Yes to all three, basically. In that it's definitely a deliberate look. I deliberately grew my hair long. Again, it was something that I'd wanted to do. I just decided to do it one day, and then I'd sort of tie it up just for it's easy. It's quite curly, my hair, and it becomes a bit wild. I was turning up to work wearing it. For some reason, if you wear a suit and you've got long curly hair, you look like one of the Dubliners, one of the Irish folk band. I don't know if you've seen those from the 70s. And it's just a bit of a strange look. So I tie it back. And then that became my look. Basically, I was sporting the man bun before it was a thing. And I've become quite attached to it, really. So yeah, so it's definitely my look. But I do get people sort of thinking that I'm not what a lawyer should look like, and I think that's nonsense personally, because I am a lawyer and this is what I look like, So it's a bit silly, but there's definitely a perception of what lawyers should look like and what lawyers should sound like and so on. I don't necessarily think it's true. I think that as long as you can advocate on someone, you need to be rounded and you need to be able to understand people and communicate and so on, and that's as important as anything else. And so that as long as you're authentic to yourself, you can do that.
Absolutely. And of course, you can be a lawyer and be black, as we've discovered.
Yeah, exactly.
Some courts don't seem to realise still, but
no.
That's great. Well, keep the man bun as suits you, along with the beard. And thank you so much for talking law with me, Sally Penni. It's been really interesting, Chris, finding about your career as a lawyer and comedian and artist. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Sally.
A big thank you to lawyer and comedian Chris Kehoe for talking law with me in this interview. If you enjoyed this podcast, please catch up with our previous episodes where you can hear my conversation with a number of leaders in law, from former judges to managing partners to QCs and solicitors. If you enjoy it, please do share with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter @SallyPenny1 or search for Sally Penni or Women in the Law UK on LinkedIn or Instagram. I'd love you to follow. Thanks to our production team, Sam Walker and Michael Blades at What Goes On Media. Until next time, bye for now.